They told her she was too loud, too proud, too much, but she refused to shrink. Every attempt to dim her light only made her burn brighter. They whispered behind her back, thinking she couldn't hear, but she heard everything and used their doubt as fuel. When they tried to cage her spirit, she broke through the bars with her bare hands. This is not a story about survival. This is a story about a woman who turned her pain into power and her scars into armor. They tried to break her, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. Grew up in a house where silence was survival. Her father's voice filled every room with commands and criticism. Her mother moved like a ghost through hallways, teaching her daughter through example that invisibility kept you safe. By the age of 7, she had learned to make herself small, to fold into corners, to speak only when spoken to. But there was something in her that refused to be completely extinguished, a tiny flame that flickered in the darkness of her childhood bedroom when she would stare at the ceiling and promise herself that one day things would be different. She didn't know how or when, but she knew she wouldn't always live like this. The beatings came when she spoke up. The punishment arrived when she questioned why things had to be a certain way. Her father believed that daughters should be seen and not heard, that women were meant to serve and submit. Every time she showed a spark of independence, he tried to stamp it out. Her mother would pull her aside afterwards and beg her to just obey, to just be quiet, to just survive until she was old enough to leave. But she couldn't. Something in her DNA refused to accept that this was all life had to offer. In school, she found books, and in those pages she discovered entire worlds where women were heroes, where girls could be brave, where courage was celebrated, not punished. She read under her covers at night with a flashlight, memorizing stories of warriors and revolutionaries and ordinary women who did extraordinary things. These stories became her oxygen. They reminded her that the walls of her home were not the boundaries of the universe. At 15, she got her first job at a local cafe, lying about her age because they needed someone immediately. She saved every penny, hiding the money in a hole she'd cut into her mattress. Her father didn't know she was working. She told him she was in the library after school, which wasn't entirely a lie because she often stopped there to do homework before her shifts. The money represented freedom, and she protected it fiercely. The cafe owner was a woman in her 60s who had survived her own difficult marriage. She saw something in this teenage girl who worked harder than anyone she'd ever employed. She would watch her serve customers with a smile, even though you could see the exhaustion in her eyes. One night after closing, the owner sat her down and said, "You're planning to leave, aren't you?" It wasn't really a question. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. The woman reached across the table and squeezed her hand. She said, "When you go, don't look back, and don't you dare let anyone make you small again." Those words became a mantra. At 17, on the morning after her high school graduation, she packed a single bag and walked out of her father's house for the last time. She had saved enough for a bus ticket to the city and first month's rent in a tiny studio apartment she'd found online. Her mother found the note she'd left on the kitchen table. In it, she thanked her mother for teaching her what kind of woman she didn't want to become. It wasn't meant to be cruel, but honest. Years later, her mother would tell her that reading those words was the wake-up call she needed to eventually leave too. The city was overwhelming and terrifying and absolutely beautiful. She got a job waiting tables at a busy restaurant where the tips were good enough to cover rent and groceries. She enrolled in community college, taking classes in business and communications. Every door that opened led to another door. Every small victory built her confidence. But the world had other ways of trying to break women. Her manager at the restaurant was a man who believed his position gave him certain privileges. He would stand too close when reviewing her orders. His comments about her appearance made her skin crawl. When she pushed back, he began cutting her shifts, claiming business was slow. She knew what he was doing. She had two choices: accept the harassment or lose the income she desperately needed. She chose a third option. She started documenting everything, keeping a detailed record of every inappropriate comment, every retaliatory action. She talked to other waitresses and discovered she wasn't the only one. Together, they filed a complaint with the restaurant's corporate office. The manager was fired within 2 weeks, but the victory came with a price. Some of her co-workers blamed her for creating drama. Anonymous notes appeared in her locker calling her a troublemaker. She wanted to quit to walk away from the hostility, but that would mean letting them win. So she stayed, and she worked harder than ever, and slowly the atmosphere shifted. The new manager was professional and fair. The other women who had been harassed thanked her privately. She learned an important lesson that doing the right thing often costs you something, but the cost of staying silent is always higher. College was its own battlefield. She was older than most of her classmates, working full-time, while they worried about fraternity parties. Professors sometimes dismissed her questions or talked over her in discussions. In one business class, the instructor told her that women didn't have the aggressive instinct needed for corporate leadership. She could have accepted this as truth. Instead, she worked twice as hard, earned the highest grade in the class, and on the last day she approached his desk. She said, "Thank you for motivating me to prove you wrong." His face turned red, but she didn't wait for a response. She had learned that the best revenge is success. After graduating, she applied for positions at marketing firms around the city. Rejection letters piled up. Too inexperienced, they said. Not the right fit. She knew some of the rejections came down to the fact that she didn't have the connections or the pedigree that other candidates had. She didn't attend an elite university. She didn't have family friends who could make introductions. But she had something else. She had hunger and creativity and an absolute refusal to give up. She created her own opportunities. She started freelancing, taking on small projects for local businesses, building websites, creating social media campaigns, designing logos. She worked 16-hour days, turning her tiny apartment into an office. Her portfolio grew. Her reputation spread through word of mouth. Within 2 years, she had more work than she could handle. She hired her first employee, then her second. The small freelance operation became a legitimate agency. But success didn't shield her from people who thought women shouldn't be in charge. Clients would show up for meetings and ask when the boss was arriving. When she explained that she was the boss, they would look skeptical. Some would request to speak with a male colleague, assuming a man must be the real decision-maker. She handled these situations with grace, at first patiently explaining her qualifications. But eventually she stopped explaining. She simply did the work and let the results speak for themselves. The clients who couldn't respect her left. The ones who stayed helped her business grow. There was a man she fell in love with who seemed different at first. He praised her ambition and said he admired her independence. But as her business grew and started generating serious revenue, his admiration curdled into resentment. He began making cutting remarks about her success. He would belittle her achievements in front of friends. When she worked late, he accused her of caring more about her company than their relationship. She recognized the pattern. This was what control looked like when it wore a nicer mask. Her father had used violence. This man used emotional manipulation. Different methods, same goal: to make her smaller, to make her doubt herself, to break her spirit. She ended the relationship knowing it would hurt, but understanding that staying would destroy her. He told her she would regret it, that she would end up alone, that her business would fail without him. None of those things happened. Her business continued to thrive. She discovered that being alone was far better than being with someone who diminished her. She built friendships with other women entrepreneurs who understood the specific challenges they all faced. They supported each other, celebrated victories together, strategized about obstacles. This network became her chosen family, stronger than any blood ties. There was a moment that changed everything. A potential client came to her agency, a major corporation looking to rebrand. Landing this account would put her company on the map. The presentation day arrived, and she walked into a conference room full of executives, all men in expensive suits. She could feel their skepticism the moment she started speaking. They interrupted her, constantly questioning her strategies, second-guessing her recommendations. Halfway through the presentation, she stopped talking. The room fell silent. She looked at each of them and said, "I'm going to be very clear. You came to me because you need what I offer. I don't need this contract, but you need the expertise I bring. If you're not interested in actually listening, then we're wasting each other's time." She gathered her materials, prepared to walk out. The CEO held up his hand. He said, "You're right. Please continue." The room shifted. She delivered the rest of her presentation without a single interruption. They signed the contract that afternoon. Later, the CEO told her that her willingness to walk away convinced him she had the confidence and conviction they needed. It was a gamble that could have backfired, but she knew her worth and refused to accept disrespect. That contract led to others. Her agency's reputation grew. She was invited to speak at conferences to mentor young women starting businesses to share her story. Every time she spoke, she made sure to emphasize that success wasn't about being fearless. It was about being afraid and doing it anyway. It was about getting knocked down and choosing to stand back up. It was about collecting your scars and wearing them as proof that you survived. The woman who had once hidden money in her mattress now ran a multi-million-dollar company. The girl who was told to be silent now had a voice that reached thousands. But she never forgot where she came from. She established a scholarship fund for young women from difficult backgrounds. She hired people others overlooked, giving chances to those who reminded her of herself. She made sure that her success created pathways for others. Her mother reached out after years of silence. She had finally left and wanted to apologize for not protecting her daughter better. They met for coffee and talked for hours. Her mother cried and apologized repeatedly. She took her mother's hands and said, "You did what you could with what you knew. We're both free now. That's what matters." They built a new relationship as two women who had both survived and escaped. Her father never apologized, never acknowledged what he had done. She made peace with the fact that she would never get that closure. Some people never change, never accept responsibility, never see the damage they cause. She didn't need his apology to heal. She had already freed herself. Now in her 30s, she looks back at everything she survived and everything she built. The journey left marks. There are still nights when the old fears creep in, when she wonders if she's doing enough, being enough. But those moments pass more quickly now. She has learned to silence the voices that once told her she was too much or not enough. She has learned that her spirit was never theirs to break. They tried with fists and words and rejection and doubt. They tried with systems designed to keep women small and quiet. They tried with every tool at their disposal. But here she stands, running a successful company, mentoring the next generation, speaking her truth without apology. They tried to break her spirit, but they failed. They failed because they underestimated what women are made of. They failed because they thought trauma would destroy her, when instead it forged her into something stronger. They failed because breaking a woman's spirit requires her cooperation, and she refused to cooperate. She refused to believe that her circumstances defined her potential. She refused to accept that the abuse was her fault or that she deserved less than respect. She refused to be silent when silence meant complicity in her own oppression. Every woman who stands up after being knocked down, who speaks up after being told to shut up, who takes up space after being told to shrink, is proof that the human spirit cannot be broken, only tested and strengthened. Her story is not unique. Millions of women have similar stories of surviving households that tried to crush them, relationships that tried to diminish them, workplaces that tried to exclude them. What makes her story worth telling is not that she suffered, but that she transformed suffering into purpose. She took every lesson learned in pain and used it to build something beautiful. She turned her survival into a blueprint for others. This is what they never understand about trying to break women. Every attempt to destroy us just reveals how much strength we actually possess. Every trauma survived becomes evidence of our resilience. Every barrier overcome proves that the barriers were never as insurmountable as they claimed. They tried to break her spirit, but they only succeeded in showing her how unbreakable she truly was. And now she spends her days helping other women discover their own unbreakable cores. Because the best revenge against those who try to break you is not just surviving, it's thriving. It's building a life so full of purpose and joy and success that their attempts to diminish you become nothing more than footnotes in your story. She is living proof that you can come from nothing and build everything, that you can be broken down and build yourself back up stronger, that the people who underestimate you give you the greatest gift because they get out of your way. They tried to break her spirit, but they failed, and in failing, they created exactly what they feared most, a woman who knows her power and refuses to hide it ever again.